Hello and welcome back to Cooking the Books with Gilly Smith, the podcast which takes us through 4 food moments from the books of our favourite food writers. It's about all of life through the prism of food. And this week I'm with the woman who cooked for Joe Biden, Justin Trudeau and the late Queen at the G7 conference in 2020. But Emily Scott didn't always feel quite such a superwoman.
I remember the day I chose to stop eating, and that was just an overwhelming sense of not being good enough and really frightened of failing. Failure was a huge issue for me. Like, I won't do it and then I won't fail, but if I do it, I might fail. And that was not cool in my mind.
Her restaurant, Emily Scott Food, perched on the beach at Newquay, was the reason we drove all the way from Brighton for our anniversary this year. But as it settles into the excellence of the Cornish food landscape, Emily finds that she can take more of a step back these days. Her second book, Time and Tide, takes her to a new happy place as an established writer and much, much more deeply into her own world.
What I do is it's so personal. Every step, every decision I make, whether it's in my restaurant or writing my books, is considered, but it's about how I think and feel. And that's what's important. And I think stepping forward, which I feel I've done more in this book, even though Sea and Shore was very personal and kind of the backstory of my journey in food through Cornwall, I think this book, it feels far more like I've stepped forward and said, yeah, this is me and this is what I do. So it is incredible. It's all interlinked.
It definitely is. And I remember, when we were talking about the G7 in the last episode, about the last book, and you were talking about how small you were. And it was very sweet. You was like, and there's me meeting the Queen and Joe Biden and all these amazing people. And I'm so small. I mean, you do actually use those words in that episode. And this feels like you're really kind of much more confident and you're saying, really, I know who I am now. Does it feel like that?
It does, although it's quite interesting. Yesterday with the first kind of serial of recipes in OFM, I had to have a chat with myself by the end of the day because I just went into this like imposter syndrome took over me and I was like, what, I do not deserve this, I'm not good enough kind of scenario. So I had a chat to myself and this morning I feel better about that, but 100% more confident with this. And 2 years on, which actually isn't a very long time, a lot happens. And, I just feel I'm always very humble and not grateful in the sense of like, I know I've worked hard for this. I've worked incredibly hard, but I definitely feel like I've stepped up and actually I'm very, very much have a place in this wonderful world of books. It's incredible. I mean, I'm actually surprised myself that I've managed to do it and run a restaurant.
I mean, it's interesting that you use that as an addendum, and run a restaurant. A book is a thing that launches you into your community. It makes you feel heard and accepted in a way that possibly just being a restaurateur doesn't. What does that add to your world as a restaurateur to actually be a cookbook writer and a really well respected one at that?
I feel like I've done it the other way round, if that makes sense, because I've always wanted to write, but I didn't realise I could write. And so the restaurant has kind of been the platform that has over the years, and we're talking 20 odd years. I haven't done this very fast at all. This isn't, I haven't been a one-hit wonder. This is years of consistently just working and trying to figure out how I was going to be able to do it, because it's not an easy process. Anyone that says writing books is easy or, I mean, yes, maybe it does happen quickly for some people, but in my experience, this is a long time coming for me. And I think I found my place. Writing books is absolutely where I want to be. There's nothing more creative, beautiful. I love the solitude of writing, but then I love how collective and collaborative it becomes. I love the fact that I write as I think. I think there's a word. My editor told me there is a word for the way I write. I literally write how I'm thinking on the pages. So editing is quite interesting sometimes because you don't want it to be too kind of floaty, but that's kind of how I write. But I've definitely done it the other way round. And if I had to give up, well, it's quite hard, but if I had to give up one thing, I would definitely want to stay in the world of books.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Since we last spoke, I've started doing Cooking the Books food writing retreats, and that I've done creative writing retreats here forever, and I do this thing called dream writing. It's a thing that you do. You wouldn't call it dream writing because that's my term for it, but it is writing the dream, and it is going into a sort of a meditative state. And I can completely understand what you mean by the editing, because the point is that you don't edit dream writing. It is a stream of consciousness, but you go into the zone, and you really go into the zone, and what you do is you take us into that zone with you, and of course it's so beautiful. So you're writing about colour and season, and you take us into your world. Tell us a little bit about how you create that space in your mind.
What I write on the pages in my book and my first book is how I see my world through my eyes. So it's real. And I've always, what's been so wonderful about the kind of creating, I guess I feel like I've created more space, and especially writing about time, it's almost become more beautiful because I've allowed myself more time to do it, if that makes any sense at all. It's like the best therapy ever, this book, because writing about just what's around me and writing about what I think and feel is really important.
Well, you talk about mindfulness.
Yeah, I do, which is new to me. I don't really practice it, but having been on such a mission for so long and been in the thick of running restaurants and working incredibly long hours just apron on, writing has given me, I guess, permission to kind of stop, and especially with this book, because I was writing very early in the morning a lot of the time, because that's just when I like writing. But the mindfulness of just stopping for that cup of tea and not trying to do anything else for 10 minutes. I'm not talking about that long. I mean, we all live in a world where we're all kind of very, very busy. So this book has given me the sense of like, rush slowly. There's no need to kind of, who actually cares really what you're doing? It's all about thinking about how you approach things.
Yeah, I mean, you say that you actually slow down to think about what you're just about to say, in real life to other people. That kind of mindfulness, just being really careful rather than sort of being cautious, being caring about everything that you say, everything that you do, everything that you look at, everything being that you describe. And having tasted your food, I can see that that's how you cook as well. I mean, it's incredibly beautifully nuanced and delicate and pretty. It helped enormously that we had the most beautiful sunset while we were eating your food.
It's considered, and it's seasonal, and it's about provenance, and it's about simplicity. And what's lovely for me now, my role has changed hugely in my restaurant. Gone are the days where if I wasn't apron on, the door would shut. I now have a team that really have got behind my business and my brand in the sense of just I'm quite specific about how I want things. That's all. And I've settled into that new role of just trusting other people and delegating. And again, all those things I kind of, I guess, write about in this book about time, and just, I think we all need, without getting too kind of heavy right now, I think we've got to be kinder to ourselves and give ourselves more space and ask for help. And, we don't need to be these superwomen anymore.
Taking us into your home, that's your considered design. You put things beautifully, those lovely French bags in the hallway. You clearly have that kind of eye, which I'm becoming less intimidated by as I understand that I do not have to be that person.
But that's all real. If I open the door now, they are just hanging up. And I think and my home is very much where my heart is, and throughout it, there are cards my children have written over the years. There's photographs. It's quite chaotic as well. I won't show you the pile of ironing behind me.
You do obviously take us down to the coves, and you talk about the beach days and the boat days and the sunset swims, and it's all very Cornish. But you also take us to France through your memories, and again you use this dream writing, and it's not full sentences sometimes. You just write white peaches, apricots and melon from the melon man who would arrive with great enthusiasm on the dusty road outside the villa, with all the senses filled with beautiful fragrance from the mountainside, lavender, rosemary and pine. Words that conjure up the most amazing kind of childhood. But there are obviously a lot of recipes. Did you have to do a lot of recipe testing?
This book, I actually had a wonderful girl that I actually met through Instagram that said, I'm looking for some extra work. I would love to test recipes if you need that. So I went, okay, yes, good idea. And she was brilliant, Annie, because I was able to give her, you know, like chapter by chapter, just say, here's your 10, I'm doing this 10. And then anything that didn't quite work, I'd then send to her. And there was actually, just before it went, the deadline went, I sent her a couple of recipes going, I just don't think these are going to work. I'm terrified these won't work. So we retested them. We were slightly like obsessive about it. But it's just testing recipes and putting your own you into them. That's what's most important, isn't it? Because, you know, there's a tomato salad recipe in my book. You know, no one's reinventing the wheel on that. Recipes are recipes, but it's what you do to them, or how I feel about a tomato, or how I think about salad leaves. Like a green salad's in my book. That's not rocket science, is it?
It's interesting actually, because Elizabeth Luard has been she's done 2 out of 3 of the food writing retreats with me, and last week she did a recipe testing session and got people to write a recipe in 4 different ways. 1 straight ingredients, until the 4th one, which is a whole story about what the recipe is. And that was just a fascinating creative exercise. You know, how do you think your way into a recipe? What does a recipe really say to anyone?
Yeah.
You know, for example, you take us to your half-French grandfather's ratatouille, and you talk about shortbread. You know, each of those recipes takes us into a different aspect of your life, and you can taste and you can smell it, and you get all those memories along with each of those recipes. But you do say, and it's an interesting one, you say you have a troubled relationship with food, and have had for a very long time, and as a teenager you suffered from anorexia. When this episode goes out, it will be the 3rd in a row when I've talked to people about difficult relationships with food. Ravinda Bogle, Claire Finney, and then you. Each of you have chosen food as your life, as your career. How does that work for people whose daughters, sons are going through that right now, and might just take some heart from that?
So it was a long time ago, like in my kind of teenage years. So probably from the age of about 13, 14, started having I just remember I've actually written recently a piece on my Substack about from the beginning. And I remember the day I chose to stop eating. And that was just an overwhelming sense of not being good enough and really frightened of failing. Failure was a huge issue for me. Like, I won't do it and then I won't fail. But if I do it, I might fail. And that was not cool in my mind. But food's always been there. I mean, reading my book, talking about France, my mother's cooking, you know, growing up, I had a very nice, happy childhood with lovely food memories. But at the time, food was the only thing I could control. So actually, food is not really about weight or food, really. It's just about a sense of being in control for me at that point. Because I've always loved food, but it was the one thing I could control. And then I was good at it, which sounds really crazy. But anorexia, any eating disorder, does think you can't live without it. It's that strong.
Yeah. And it was cooking in your cousin's kitchen in Burgundy that
I found my place.
Extraordinary. Do you remember the kind of the process with which you were able to let it go?
I think it took a long time to let it go, but I think what I've held on to is always having a choice. I even have a choice today. If I could stop eating today, because I know that's something I could do, which again sounds it's a really difficult thing to overcome, because you have to eat to live. You can't avoid food. So, but I know I have a choice, and that's the kind of, if I was trying to inspire anyone going through an eating disorder, you have a choice. You do have a choice. And, I was in and out of hospitals, being refed, came out, lost the weight, bouncing back in and out. And I think it took someone that I was in treatment with dying, actually, for me to think, actually, I don't want to die. This is serious. And it's not about weight. At 6 stone, I thought I was overweight. There are so many issues involved in it, but ultimately it's about self-worth. It's about kind of, just feeling good about yourself. And I found that, and a lot of people with eating disorders do end up working with food, but sometimes working with the drug of your choice, so to speak, is a good thing.
That's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
But I turned it round, and I found it's not about feeding people, because I enjoy eating as much as I enjoy cooking for people, but it's about finding your place. And I've said it before, but cooking for people, ones you love or strangers, baking a cake for someone just because, is one of the most loving of all human skills.
Absolutely.
And I think that's just the place. I really enjoy that. I get excited about having people for dinner or for lunch, or baking a cake and having a friend round. That's genuinely brings me happiness.
You're a feeder. You can tell you're a feeder. I mean, obviously you're a feeder as a restaurateur, but actually with your first food moment, Evie's macaroni cheese, this is your daughter, her food moment. Tell us about why you chose this one as your first.
So my children have always been a huge part, obviously, of my life, but we're quite a close-knit team, and I've always loved cooking with them, for them. But Evie, growing up, would always, whatever the season, I'd ask her, what would you like for lunch? What would you like for supper? As kids, you remember kind of having those chats, like, what are we going to have for tea? And it would always be macaroni cheese. So over the years, we've just done this together, and she's very good at an old bechamel, and it's just developed. And she's off to uni in September. So my baby, so to speak, is leaving the nest, which is going to be interesting. But she can definitely make a macaroni cheese. But these days, with Tabasco, perhaps replaces ketchup.
And you say, different kinds of cheeses as well, just swapping things out and changing up the flavours. Your second food moment is, again, staying with the family. Mark, your biggest supporter, your second husband, life has totally turned around for you, hasn't it? Through that choice that you've made with him. And this is a lovely moment about how you spend time together making marmalade. How lovely.
Yeah, we
Tell
do.
me about that.
It's very competitive. Our relationship is based on a lot of teasing and a lot of, healthy competition, I'd say. So I will give him credit for this. But we have a lovely time. I just think cooking, whether it's making marmalade or baking a cake or making supper together, is a lovely thing to do. And I think, if you can do that with the person that you love, even better. So we have fun, chopping, peeling, zesting, all those lovely processes that just are so simple but actually are very therapeutic, and you can chat and talk, and then we end up with jars of sunshine throughout the year. Maybe too many. We give quite a lot away.
Yeah, they make great presents, don't they?
Yeah.
You talk a lot about your family. Family is very important to you. And your third food moment is Granny Jean. You also talk about your French grandparents and your half French grandfather and the time that you spent in France. But Granny Jean sounds a bit like you. Super capable.
Oh my God.
She is, isn't she? She's you.
It's hilarious. I said I'd never turn into her, but I think I have, basically.
Tell us about her.
She's super capable, but I never got on with her growing up because she was always that person that you were always like, oh, I'm going to disappoint her. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. And she would have loved this. She would have loved my books. And I bonded with her when I had children, actually, because she was a paediatrician in her time. So she loved the development of babies and was very, very proud. And sadly, she died when Evie was 3 months old. So she hasn't seen my career at all, really. But she would have loved all this. She would have loved it. But we used to go to these, I mean, I'm sorry, these quite awkward family barbecues on a Sunday. And I hope I'm a bit more relaxed than Granny Jean. I think in that time, everything, was all quite tense.
But how extraordinary to have someone like that in your life as you were growing up, who was a paediatrician in the 1940s.
Yeah.
Women didn't really have those kind of jobs then. She must have been she must have been the only woman you knew who had that kind of presence in the world.
Yeah, she was amazing, and she was interested in everything. She loved going to the theatre. She loved gardening. I mean, she did everything. She did it well, even if she didn't really know how to do it. She had a go. But she was definitely a feeder. But the family barbecues, the highlight of them was the chocolate sauce, because you knew that whatever happened, if you had to sit next to kind of a long lost cousin or uncle and have that awful, awkward kind of, I was awkward generally. I knew we'd get chocolate sauce at the end of it, so it would be fine. On her hot plate, it would come out and sit there for ages, but it was very good. And this is such a nice recipe.
Your final food moment takes us right back into your world, into Cornwall, but always has that element of France. It creeps into absolutely everything you do. It's the Cornish bouillabaisse. It's fish from Cornwall with a Marseille twist.
Yeah, definitely.
Go on, tell me about this one.
Definitely there's a fish stew in Sea and Shore, and I just thought, I want to put this one in as well, because it does have much more of a kind of Marseille or Provençal type feel to it, with the orange zest and the anchovy and again it's not necessarily about it's not necessarily about following. I want you to follow the recipe, but it's about kind of slightly doing what you want to do as well. If you want to put anchovies in, that's great. If you don't, that's fine, kind of thing. But this one it's such comfort food for me, and I think inspiring people to cook with fish is a good thing, and this is such an easy way to do it. And also, if you didn't want to, this tomato base is delicious for anything else really. But you can use whatever fish, and like I've said before, if you're not sure, talk to your fishmonger. But have a go, because it really is wonderful. And of course, the aioli makes it, like any sort of mayonnaise, makes most things absolutely delicious. But it's a lovely one for sharing, and it's quite rustic. But it just brings people together, I think.
It feels like you kind of writing yourself real. With the first book, it was beautiful, very stylish, very good looking. Your writing feels more you this time. It feels like you've got more to say. You throw in little bits that we can pick up and go, oh gosh, there's a big story there, like the anorexia, for example. You're tempting us into your world a little bit more. I wonder what the next book could give us more of. What do you think it might be?
I'm not sure where I'll be going. I've kind of hinted that I'd love to go back to France, and I'd love to go back to that village near Mâcon where I was so unwell, but I found my place, because there are some wonderful recipes and stories from there. Like Baby Rose the butcher would turn up in his van outside, and it was all very kind of raucous and joyful, communal type eating, and the goat's cheese would be brought over from the farm. You could almost, just literally stone's throw away. And then I'd love to go back to Bagnols, and where I know that we're in touch with the people that bought the villa off my grandparents. So it would be wonderful to kind of literally go back there, and to Bordeaux, where Mark and I have spent a lot of time. If not, I may stay in Cornwall. I'm not sure. I have started writing the third one actually, but I'm very much in France, so I'm not sure where they'll want me to go. But just to even be thinking about a third book, I mean, you know that's never in the bag until you kind of hope, and then I think I'll just write it for myself if I don't do this again. But just to have a second book, a physical copy of a second book, is incredible. I'm very that it's as I say, take everything else away, but there's something incredible about being a published author. It's about finding your voice, stepping forward, showing people who you are, or just saying to yourself, this is me, and validating yourself.
Thanks for listening. Do pop over to my Substack for extra bites over Emily and her Cornwall. Just search for Gilly Smith on Substack, and I'll see you next week.